Hey guys, what is up and welcome to a new Tesla update video. So today, as per usual, let's go over Tesla stock. Let's go over the market. Let's talk about what is happening in this market, right? You know, kind of up and down, kind of all over the place intraday, just to end fairly flat for the most part, right? For the most part, nothing too crazy, but it feels like a lot of things are happening. So I'll give you my thoughts moving forward for Tesla and the broader market as well, including the VIX. So let's jump into it. If you enjoyed, don't forget to hit that like button. This is not financial advice. I'm not a financial advisor. Of course, if you enjoy my technical analysis, thoughts on the charts, updates, etc. Well, again, I do share my thoughts with my members every single day as the market is trading. That link, of course, is down below in the description of the video, where all you have to do is go to any of my videos, and at the bottom of the video, there's a link in the top of the description. Just click that bad boy right here, bam, and you get access to this page where you can join if you're interested. Again, all it is just $3 a month. For the first tier, which includes all my Tesla updates, broader market updates, etc., options flow, etc. $5 includes NVDA as well if you're interested in NVIDIA updates, and then $7 includes everything else, right? We have my tier 3 posts, of course, where I shared charts in the market that are setting up nicely, right? Setting up for potential breakouts, or just has a potential nice looking setup. This market's very choppy, so it's a bit of a more difficult market, granted, but nonetheless. And access to my Discord, where we have a private chat room for tier 3 members. I do chart requests every Sunday. So again, we'd love to have you there. But jumping into it, Tesla closing the day in the green, 1.4% in the green, closing at $435 per share so far, not looking too shabby. So what does this all, what does this mean for Tesla stock moving forward? Is this bullish? Are we finally ready to head higher, right? Are we finally ready to visit, close to 460, for instance, right? Or is this just a bull trap? Are we about to head back down, right? Well, that's the main question. Currently, I do give bulls the slight benefit of the doubt. I'll be completely honest, I do, despite there being concerns in the market, which again, I'll go over more on SPY very soon. I do give bulls this kind of, if I had to pick, I do give bulls the slight advantage here. Absolutely. Why? Well, let's talk about it, right? So the main things I like the fact that Tesla's doing is the fact that, well, number one, the EMAs are still bullish is number one, right? That's the most obvious one, of course. We're still holding the 921 EMA roughly right around it, right? So, which is good. We're not really closing too far below them and pretty much right around them, which is nice. We're holding this rising trend line, which is good. And we have arguably broken out of this kind of downward channel / potential bull flag-ish. Not the prettiest bull flag in the world, but a bull flag-ish nonetheless. And arguably today, we retested it today on the lows of the day, right? So there's a lot of, positive signs for Tesla stock so far developing. Now, it doesn't mean that this will come to fruition. And what I like to see, and the thing that I would be, I guess, more convinced of is if Tesla, breaks past 440, 441. I mean, that's exactly where we came up today. Today's the high of the day, 440 and a half. Right? I've been talking about this 440, 441 level for the past, week or something like that, right? So it's a crucial level to break. This is the level that keeps rejecting price, this zone right around here. It needs to snap, right? The bulls need to get back above this level and show strength above this level, right? If we can start getting candles above this level, closing a daily above it, right? 1 hour, whatever, right? Whatever your time frame, but essentially showing strength above this and not just essentially getting up here and getting slapped back down is what's needed to really kind of ignite that, move to the upside to, again, close to 460, around there. I'm not, I'm not giving exact numbers, but close to 460, give or take, of course, right? So that's what needs to be done. That's the main goal for bulls right now. They need to get back above this level. And if we can do that, if we can get above this level, and I can even put somewhere like this, for instance, right? If we can get above this kind of 441, 440 level, that would be, in my opinion, a very, very good sign, again, to see higher. Now, obviously, nothing is guaranteed. So what are the, risks behind this, right? What is the risk? Well, despite those bullish outcomes, the MACD and the stochastic, for instance, are still not really fully buying this move, right? They're not fully convinced. You can see the MACD is still making lower lows, still kind of pointing straight down, right? Stochastic is still decently below 60. So those momentum indicators aren't really buying this move just yet. I do think that if we break 440, they will be looking a bit more convincing. MACD will print a higher low, things like that, of course. But until that happens, despite me still believing that the bulls have the advantage here, it's definitely not a substantial advantage, I guess is what I'm trying to say. It's not like a guaranteed by any means. It's just, yeah, I think they have the advantage here. I think this is kind of like their game to lose, if that makes sense, at least for this kind of short-term movement. Again, this is more shorter term. I'm talking more specifically going into earnings, things like that. I'm not talking about for the next 3 months or something. This is for the next week, honestly, right? About the next week or so. But nonetheless, that's kind of how I look at it. But yeah, further risks, right? Further things that can potentially invalidate this, potential bullish thesis that is, in my opinion, setting up here for Tesla stock is, well, a loss of the EMAs, number one. But, especially if we also get back down below this trend line, this one right here, right? You can see we've bounced off of it are almost 3 days in a row, so obviously if we start closing candles below this trend line, that, would be an absolute concern, right? That would not be what you want to be seeing from a bullish perspective. So let's see how that plays out moving forward, right? But in my opinion, the level to watch for on Tesla stock, about 425 roughly, right? That is like, 430 to 425 is that sort of $5 kind of bullish support range right now. Yeah, losing that, closing daily candles below that once again, it would be the concern, because again, you have to remember, this is a rising trend line, right? It is constantly, every single day, it's going up, a couple dollars or so, right? So it's, that threshold is increasing, right? As to what level the bulls need to continue holding to essentially continue this upward momentum that they're trying to establish here with, a stronger confirmation, again, above that 440 to 441-ish level. So hopefully that all makes sense. But that's kind of the main thing I'm looking at. Now, another thing I like to look at sometimes on Tesla stock is obviously we have the SMI down here. I put these two kind of together. So sometimes what I'll do is I'll turn off the EMAs. This is mainly for my option selling strategy, because I do two strategies. I trade momentum and I also sell options, right? And then for option selling, what I'll do is I'll usually combine the 4-hour SMI, and sometimes I'll also combine it with the Bollinger Bands, right? Because the Bollinger Bands, nothing perfect, right? For instance, when Tesla was tanking down here, not great, right? Let's just say that, not great. So, no, there's no such thing as a perfect strategy, right? You just make that, very clear. But you can see pretty often enough, this thing, whenever it gets to, the top or the bottom, right? It usually is close to finding either a resistance or support, right? It's not guaranteed. Nothing is perfect. It's not just like a buy the bottom, sell the top band, right? That's usually only good in chop. So again, it's worth noting that it's by no means a perfect strategy. But this is why I like selling options, because it increases the probability that you are going to be right. Because here, if you bought the bottom, but it went down slightly down further, well, if you sold puts instead of just buying here, you have more wiggle room, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Anyway, I'm kind of digressing here, or I digress, whatever. The point I'm trying to make is the fact that the Bollinger Bands are getting tight. They're getting tight. You can see back here when we started consolidating for a while, right? You can see they slowly got tighter and tighter and tighter, and the distance between the upper and the lower band wasn't very high, right? And you can see on the daily chart, it's getting pretty tight again. Tesla is building up a move here, right? It does feel like we're building up a move. Whether or not that's going to be up or down is, obviously still remains to be seen. But I do think that this band will actually play out earnings. I think, unfortunately, we will have to wait till earnings to get the big move, right? The potential the actual move to the stock, right? I do think that'll take until earnings, but that doesn't mean that up into earnings, we still can't potentially get a touch towards the top end of the Bollinger Band, which also lies around that 460 range, which, like I said, above 440, yeah, I think 460, or at least close to, that's a, it's a very real possibility, guys. It's a very real possibility. So let's see. But combine that with the SMI, so sometimes, you see that Tesla's kind of, for instance, as an example, Tesla's kind of right in the middle of the bands right now. You can see it got close to the bottom band and it bounced, right? Congratulations. But sometimes I'll also combine it with the 4-hour SMI. Where is this sitting? Well, once we got to the bottom of the bands here on the daily charts, the SMI was also near the bottom. It's kind of a double confirmation that there's a good chance that unless, we completely tank, obviously, and the market just essentially has a mini crash, if you will, there's a good chance that we're, at the very least going to slow down the bleeding, if not get at least some level of a bounce from here, right? This is the good thing about selling options sometimes, is because if you sell options here, you don't have to, the stock doesn't need to go up substantially for you to make money, because all it has to do is do nothing at the end of the day and you still make money, right? It's kind of a nice thing about selling options sometimes, where you don't have to necessarily be completely correct. You could just be somewhat correct and you still win. Worst case scenario, you're buying your stock at a cheaper price. I feel like it's, for the most part, it's a win-win. It just requires capital, unfortunately, because selling options, especially on Tesla, well, you need 43K. It's a lot of money, right? It's definitely a little bit of money. Anyways, I'm going on a tangent here. The point I'm just trying to make is the fact that we are dead smack in the center and the daily Bollinger Bands are getting tight. So I do, there is a move building up. There is compression absolutely building up for the stock here. So let's continue monitoring that and see where that ultimately takes the stock and, where we ultimately go off of that as well. But again, I do give the bulls a slight, benefit of the doubt here going into earnings, especially above 440. So worth mentioning. SPY. Let's talk about SPY. What's actually, before we do that, weekly chart on Tesla stock. What's the weekly? Well, we're still at this green Fibonacci, right? We're still resisting this green Fibonacci. We're still having, major issues getting well past that. And every time we do, we get smacked back down, which is why I said, any pop from here, maybe as early as tomorrow, right? 460-ish, close to, is still my target. I'll be completely honest. That is my main target right now. So, let's see what happens from that. But worth mentioning that, we're still at this weekly major resistance. So I don't see too much higher than 460. But I do think earnings is going to be that major kind of, next big mover obviously, right? It's usually how it is. SPY. I want to talk about SPY. So SPY, what's SPY doing on the daily chart? Let's take a quick peek at the daily chart. So good news and bad news, right? I'm surprised it's actually getting this kind of, I don't know if compress is the right word, but a lot of intraday volatility just to kind of end relatively flat and in between key levels, right? Very interesting situation that the SPY is in, because you can take a look here. We tested that range I mentioned, I think the past few days, right? That 666, 667 range. Yeah, we went slightly past that, but we didn't close above that, right? That's what we want to see. We want to close above that. So you can see this level now is clearly turning into a bit of a problem, right? It's turning into a bit of a resistance here. It's a bit of a situation that, the bulls need to overcome, I guess is what I'm trying to say, right? So if we can start getting daily closures essentially above this range right here, that would be a positive development from a bullish perspective. Because then on top of that, the last 2 days, we obviously had these EMAs turn into, potential resistance. You can see the wicks at the top, but now we're closing back above them. So we're kind of sandwiched in between these kind of, sort of a rock and a hard place, I guess is that saying, right? Where yeah, we're technically back above the EMAs, back above the 21 EMA. That is good news in my opinion. That is good news. But we're also still below key resistance levels. This is not good. If I go to the 1 hour chart and bring out the Fibonacci's, what do the Fibonacci's tell us? Well, you can see, guys, we came up right almost to perfection into these green fibs on the 1 hour time frame, essentially fully filled this fair value gap, and then we got a rejection. So that's the concern here, right? So it's a very tricky situation. I mean, usually it's tricky once the VIX gets spiked, or, once the VIX is elevated, the market becomes difficult, right? It becomes a little more difficult to read. It's more volatile, especially intraday. It's definitely, a trickier read. But the easiest way to look at it that I can think of is the fact that, there is that risk that this fair value gap has filled from a bearish perspective. It's a bearish fill, if you will. And below this range right here, not too far above us, again, about 667 or so, below that, there is caution, in my opinion, not financial advice, right? There is some potential concern. Could be even printing a potential head and shoulders pattern here, right? There's risks here. There is risks, which I think are severely, diminished if we get back above this range, right? Something like this. So worth mentioning, guys, worth mentioning. And then the VIX, of course, the VIX. I've been talking about the VIX for quite some time. It's still elevated. It's still sitting in the 20s. The 9 EMA's catching up to price. This thing needs to drop. The bulls need to, they need this thing to drop, right? This thing has to go at least below 18.5, below this kind of range that has been sort of bouncing off of, if you will. A lot of people say you can't do TA on the VIX. I don't know. I disagree personally, but it's pretty obvious that it's bouncing off of this range, right? Pretty obvious that it's not going much lower. It's pretty obvious. Okay, it wasn't super obvious, but I mentioned how it's looking like it wants to bounce very soon as the EMA's got that bullish crossover. So there were signs, but the bulls need this thing at the very least below 18.5, but ideally below 17.5, right? To really kind of settle things down in the market. And we just go back to our nice and slow kind of uptrend overall. Up here, there is still risk. There is a risk that we're printing almost like a potential bullish wedge, if you will, right? Which is kind of funny talking about that on the VIX sometimes, but it is what it is, right? It really wouldn't shock me if maybe by Friday or early next week, maybe to start the week off, Monday, Tuesday, this thing spikes again. It really wouldn't shock me, especially as long as it continues to maintain the sort of, high 18s to 19-ish range as essentially supports, right? So again, worth mentioning that while this is still elevated, there could still be continued volatility in the market. There could still be, a lot of traps, honestly, both directions in the market. But overall, it signifies that weakness in the market is still something that can absolutely persist while this thing is elevated. Now, again, almost always all these major VIX spikes, market dips, almost every single time, if not literally every single time, it's just, scary, but it's, you just buy the dip and you carry on with your day, right? Of course, that's usually how it goes. And I can't imagine this time will be any different unless, we get a severe economical downturn and things really hit the fan, which, could happen, but it's usually not the case. Let's be honest here. It's not usually the case. And even when it is the case, it, just more pain, but, 5 years down from now, maybe 10, you're probably still fine. So anyways, that's kind of what I see, guys. Thanks for watching. See you tomorrow. Peace.